I was wondering whether I should write a sermon for you or write this out. I know what I'm going to say, but I figured one is I would get too distracted and caught up in the emotions of the day, and two is I might just carry on for an hour and not, y'all be thinking, wait a minute, it's going to be a few minutes here. It's been 18 years since my family and I left Christ Church Rye, heading for Virginia Seminary in Alexandria. And since you raised me up to the priesthood and I'm about to leave you again, I wanted to spend a few minutes this morning talking about the places I've been and what I've done as a priest. We left Rye at the turn of the millennia. I thought that sounded cool, so I wanted to leave that in. The millennia. I mean, one thing to leave at the turn of the century, but after 1,000 years, been here for a while. One of the most significant things I did at Virginia Seminary happened in my senior year when I worked with the African students. My family and I introduced them to ice cream by going to Ben & Jerry's. We had them over for Thanksgiving dinner. We let them use our telephone to call home. I gave them sweaters and boots when I saw them walking around campus in their sandals. I even introduced one of them to American football. Yes, the seminary has been playing football since the 19th century. I've remained in contact with several of them, one of whom is the Archbishop of Tanzania, and the other is a bishop whose diocese encompasses the Serengeti National Park. In the fall of my senior year, I was hired by St. Matthew's, Bedford. I served that congregation for 5 years, first as assistant minister and then as associate rector. After Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast, the rector asked me to head up the relief effort. I led a team that drove a truck full of supplies to Jackson, Mississippi, 10 days after the storm. I worked with a group of parishioners to allocate money that went to repair and rebuild 2 churches. One of the more interesting moments of that effort happened as we were evaluating the churches. We had a half a dozen churches to look at to see which one or two that we might help. And so one of the parishioners at St. Matthew's loves to fly, owns a number of companies, had a private jet, was the head of the group that we were working with, so we took his jet. So they thought it would be funny, the group that was going down there, to have me go off the jet first every time we landed in someone's diocese. And they'd be like, yeah, you go out and talk to the canon something or other for the bishop. And so I would go out and I'd be like, this is awkward. What do we say here? So I said, I'm going to go with this, as you guess I probably would have. And I said after the first time, I said to the canon, yeah, that's the rector's jet. He is so pissed that we took it again. So I had the pleasure of preaching at the reopening or the reestablishment of two parishes, one in Mississippi and one in Alabama. After St. Matthew's, I returned to my high school alma mater to fulfill my dream as a priest. When I left here 18 years ago, all I wanted to do was be a chaplain at an Episcopal high school. So going to Brooks School was supposed to be the place where I could live out that dream. And for a time it was. It wasn't until I was a guest preacher at a Baptist church that I realized that I needed to make a change. Students that came, we brought our choir with us, and it was a really wonderful service, and they had a great time. And some of the students came up to me afterwards and said, Mr. Flanagan, why don't you why don't you preach like that at chapel? I said, well, they don't want me to talk about Jesus that much. And so I realized in that interaction that I had to make a change, that I wasn't going to stay there. I had missed preaching in a pulpit and in a church, and I missed speaking about Jesus as freely as I do, and my love for Jesus. And so we had to move on, and so we did. My experience at Brooks still did not change my call. For whatever reason, I have not wanted nor have I been offered a rector's position. And while I may be a rector in the future, I don't know, I suspect that God has not called me to be one. And that is why I am not one. I went into interim ministry in part because when I returned from Massachusetts to the Diocese of New York, there were no rector positions open. I had completed interim ministry training, and the church in Armonk needed an interim pastor, so that's where I went. And since then, I've worked with 3 other parishes, and each was a different size and in a different location, and I've loved each of them and the work. What's also important to say is that my journey as an interim minister has led me back to you and this wonderful church. When I left here last century, I said to my wife, Lainey, that we would never be able to return, ever. Little did I know when Lisa Hogan asked me to become your interim minister. I was thrilled. My goal as an interim has always been and will remain ever to help parishes thrive during transition. I think I've been able to accomplish that now at 4 different churches. I've had a great joy working at Christ Church. During my time with you, I worked closely with the nursery school as it hired its new director. That means a lot to me. My mom, who died about 8 years ago, was a director of a nursery school for many years. So my work with CCNS has allowed me to connect with memories of her. But there's more. Each day that I'm in my office, I hear the young voices down the hallway beyond the glass doors, and the teachers kind of twice a day, actually 4 times a day, gathering them up into their line, and who the line leader is and who the door holder is, and they begin to have this little talk. And the teachers, God bless them, they want to have the young ones quiet as they walk down the hall offices, past our offices, and let them understand that it's not just a school, but there's more going on here than that. So a number of them, the 2 teachers in particular, have decided that they needed some leverage. One of the classes, for instance, has 9 or 10 boys in it and 1 girl, so they have their hands full. And so they began to say things like, we have to be quiet because people are working. And that worked for a little while. But then they just said it didn't work quite as well as they thought. And so they said, well, Father Bob is taking a nap. He's quite old. Yeah. So each morning and afternoon at 11:30, and then at, I think at like 2, somewhere in the 2:30, I can't remember, I take a nap. And so I said, okay, at first I could go along with this. Yes, Father Bob's sleeping, okay. And I said, all right, enough of this. I got a big old couch in my office. I am decked out on that couch, sound asleep, twice a day, snoring away. And the kids walk by and they are fascinated. There's Father Bob. Is he okay today? Oh, he looks really tired. He's sleeping. This has become something that the parents even talk about it. The priest you have, he sleeps a lot. So if that wasn't enough, I said, well, Father Bob is old and he needs his sleep. So I said, okay, on Halloween, we're going to take this all the way. Bought myself an old beard. Put on some big old cape that we found in some closet. And I pulled out the oldest Bible that we have in the church, sat in a rocking chair provided me by the deacon, and I had blankets on me. And there was old Father Bob reading the big old Bible on his lap, kind of looking at them. And they said, "I've been reading here so long. Look how I became old." And if that wasn't enough, we had to have meditation Thursdays, where I said, all right, I can't sleep every day, So there I would, on the couch, fold my legs, cross my legs, be out there like that, and be meditating away. Kids, again, would stop by. Whoa, he's meditating. Some of the teachers say, he's doing yoga. I was like, it's meditating. But there I am, away. To what happens often is that down the hallways on Thursday afternoons, we hear little voices, as they're echoing back to me in their ohms. It's been quite a pleasure to work with those young people, and I'm sure Kate's going to have a great time, Where's Father Bob? Is he still sleeping in there? Door's shut. They knock on the door. Shh, Father Bob's sleeping. The door's shut. So they're convinced. It will be 4 or 5 months until they realize that I'm not here. Well, I leave you with a full heart. I leave each church that way. Interims are not supposed to fall in love with their congregations. But at that, I fail miserably. My love for you is deep, especially because you raised me up to the priesthood. When I was a kid, I never thought that I would be a priest. It never crossed my mind that was something I would do. I'd not thought of it until the moment that Father George Packard asked me to consider it as we ate together in the rectory after a youth group meeting on a Sunday evening. But since that moment, I've never looked back. Being a priest is more than I could have asked for. All that I've ever wanted is to serve God and to follow Jesus. Everything else has been one big, beautiful ice cream sundae. As a priest, I have ever been like those men from Tanzania and Malawi and Sudan and Nigeria eating ice cream for the first time. I thank you for these last 15 months. They have been a gift. And now you are ready for Kate, and I know she is ready for you. My work here is complete.